In this movie, we're going to look at managing your media files and how to clean house. The first thing I'd like to show you is where your Final Cut project files and where your event libraries are stored. Let's go ahead and hide Final Cut by pressing Command-H. Now, the primary location for your Final Cut Events folder and your Projects folder is inside of your Movies library. You'll see there's your Final Cut Events, and these are all the events available to you when using Final Cut Pro 10. And here's your Final Cut Projects file. And as you can see, here are all the project files that we've been working on in these movies. Now, we've also created some events on our scratch disk. Let's go ahead and close this window, and I'll show you where these are located. If you look at your scratch disk or any other internal or attached external drives, you'll see a folder called Final Cut Events right at the root level. You may also see a folder called Final Cut Projects if you created a project on that drive. Now, if these folders are put into a subfolder, like you make a backup folder and drop them in, Final Cut will not see the events or the projects in that folder. Let's step back into Final Cut and talk about some of the issues you might have if media goes offline. Now, I have two projects here that you don't have in your exercise files, so just go ahead and watch, and I want to explain how you can reconnect media or fix problems. The first project I want to talk about is this one called EDN External, and I created this from media that was on my scratch disk. So if this scratch disk is not plugged in, this media is going to go offline. And let me show you how that would look. I'm going to quit Final Cut by hitting Command-Q, and I'm going to take my scratch disk offline by simply dropping it into the eject folder or where the trash can is. So this would be a situation where you launch Final Cut, but you forgot to attach your external drive. You'll notice Final Cut will launch fine, but if I click on the project external scratch disk, at first it appears to have all of the clips. But as soon as I select it, you'll notice I have my offline warnings. And if I even step into this project, all the media here is offline because it was on the external disk. The best solution is to simply quit Final Cut and plug in the hard drive, and the media will immediately go back online. But what would happen in a situation where perhaps you made a duplicate to the scratch disk off your original drive and you no longer have the scratch disk available because maybe another editor is using it or you erased it? Well, here's one solution. I had originally copied the event file from my original media drive to my scratch drive when I was working on it. Let me go ahead and close my browser so you can see this. I have an additional copy of my event library here called Additional Media, and I can point to this event folder and reconnect all the existing media in my timeline. To do that, I simply select EDN External Scratch, and I go to the inspector. In the inspector, I have all my referenced events, and there it is. It's a missing event, another missing event, so all my media appears to be offline. All I have to do is select Modify Event References, and Final Cut will look at my available event library and see if it can find any of those clips. I'm going to simply select that and press OK. As you see, it connected all the files it could find. Now, in the case it can't find the file, I can re-import that media if I have the original clips. And let me show you how that works. I do want you to notice that there is a warning sign whenever there is media offline. So for instance, I have offline media here in my offline media example. And if I go over here to my Everybody Dance Now folder, I can scroll down and find the clip that's offline. Now, I know exactly where that original media file is, so it's as simple as right-clicking, selecting Import Files. Now, this file that's missing is a B-roll dance rehearsal file, and I simply say Import. Immediately, the clip comes online, and it's fixed in my sequence. As long as you know where your original files are stored, or you remember to plug in your external drive, offline media should not be a problem. Now, the last thing I want to show you is how to clean house of all those extra render files. And there's two different places to do this. One is inside of a project. So if you're working on a project and you've rendered a lot of media, and you want to clean house, you can simply go under File and select Delete Project Render Files. Final Cut will give you a dialog box and ask you whether you want to delete unused render files only or all render files. Unused render files are obsolete render files. Perhaps you brought a clip into your timeline and then you decided, nah, I'm going to delete that clip and I'm going to do something else, but you've already rendered the media. So if you hit Unused Render Files, All of your existing render files that you're using, they'll still be there, and you won't have to re-render. But you'll just get rid of that extra fat in your project. If you select all render files, Final Cut will do exactly what it says it's going to do, and that's to remove all the render files associated with that specific project. Again, a great way to clean house. Now, I do want to point out one thing. You can only delete render files on a project-by-project basis. So, for instance, I couldn't command-click on multiple project files and clean all my renders out at once. I have to do it project by project. Now, another place where render files live is in your event library. And if I click on my event library, I can go to File, and I can delete event renders. Now, one nice thing about working in the event library is if I do have multiple event libraries, I can simply hold down the Command key and clean house of all of them at once. If I select this, you get the same exact dialog box that you did for cleaning up project render files, and of course, you could say All Renders and press OK. It's a good idea to do this on a regular basis because Final Cut does a lot of rendering in the background, and these files could really start filling up your hard drive. So, in my opinion, every week, go ahead and clean house.